Norwich City's brief time at the top of the English game, or at least regularly playing those who resided there, looked to be coming to a close in 1981 despite the appointment of Ken Brown. By the end of the decade, he probably created Norwich City's greatest ever team. John Bond was gone. His aim at Manchester City was to surround himself with his own coaches, so he did so. Only problem was he had taken John Benson, who Sir Arthur Salve had offered the Norwich job, so he ultimately had to settle for second choice. His second choice, the John Bond coach that got left behind, Ken Brown. Let's be honest, the whole thing was a bit of a shit show. Not Ken Brown, but the situation surrounding the exiting manager and his son Kevin, who still held the captain's armband at Carrow Road. The whole thing turned into a right mess, with barbs being thrown from player to chairman, and somehow Kevin Bond was brought back from the brink of declaring that he'd never play for the club again. Of course, enough bridges had been burned to secure his eventual sale in February, but the club managed a tricky situation as best they could. On the pitch, however, that could not be said.
Of their best chances, but only the one was taken.
The cross, which should have been taken by Baker, was put into the net by Clive Allen, with Paul to the side.
Gemmell, and that's Tony Evans in the clear. Hansbury coming off his line, but Evans keeps calm, and Norwich are 2 down.
The record signing that John Bond had left behind in Drazen Muzinic simply wasn't cutting it, but Ken Brown had hit the proverbial jackpot with the acquisition of Liverpool's Dave Watson. The club was already in a precarious Yuletide position, so didn't really need an East Anglian derby against Ipswich to set them on a ruinous path to begin 81, a year which was equal parts disastrous for the Canaries and equal parts glorious for their neighbours down the road. A year which also started with a touch of humiliation in the cup against a former Flame.
Reeves, Dennis is in space, but he hits it himself! And they do try it. It's laid for McKenzie. The Norwich players arriving. Can he finish? Baker comes and then hesitates. It's just about the time for this corner. Power curls it in. McDonald's 6-0.
7 league losses on the spin had Norwich plunging into the drop zone. Desperate for a foothold, Ken Brown took to the market once again and came up smiling with the signatures of Nottingham Forest Martin O'Neill, Arsenal Steve Walford and goalkeeper Chris Woods. Instantly an upturn in fortunes as Brighton, Middlesbrough, Man City, Everton, Spurs and delightfully Ipswich were all beaten across the space of 8 weeks. With Palace already down, it left a gaggle of clubs from Sunderland in 16th down to Leicester fighting not to earn the other 2 relegation spots. Norwich went to Old Trafford with a 2-point cushion. That would all be but eradicated with a defeat and a win for Brighton. Of all teams Norwich wanted to play, you'd have picked Leicester City, relegated the prior game. The chances were that if the Canaries won on home soil, they would survive. After all, at least one of Everton, Sunderland, Brighton and Wolves would at least drop points. Wolves lost, Everton drew, Brighton won at Leeds, Sunderland won at Liverpool. Not that it mattered though, Jim Melrose hat-trick sunk Norwich down into the 2nd division. Bad news hung in the air like a bad fart. First, key players in Martin O'Neill and Justin Fashanu were sold. Key transfer targets like Tony Henry were missed, and by Christmas, Ken Brown's job was at risk, with the club hemorrhaging cash, losing over 300 grand annually, even with multiple millions coming in player sales. And when the football started, it started horrifically.
All rather neat and intricate this, but the ball coming in now for young Shepherd, and could the danger here, and in fact he's in the net. That right flank, and Muzinic doesn't really look happy against him, I must say. Here's the cross, it's a good one, in goes the header. Oh, what a glorious, good looking cross, oh, and a dreadful mistake, and Ronnie Moore's in, and Ronnie Moore scores. Here, if he can turn this one across, there's danger as Fern goes in for the header. Oh, what a way to finish.
It was a theme of the first half of the season. Whenever a head of steam was built up through wins against likes of Barnsley, Wrexham and Newcastle, they'd piss away goals with alarming regularity. 3 at Watford, 3 at Blackburn, 3 at Luton and 3 at home to Wednesday. The Canaries were offensively mid-table, but the glum mood around the gaff was about to change with the return of Martin O'Neill and the acquisition of West Brom's John Dean after Ken Brown was given the vote of confidence. Only then could the season begin to take shape late on in the day.
Here goes Birchin. It's in, just. Here's Bennett. It's a good one, that's it.
The latest win on the penultimate weekend, one that broke Orient fans' hearts by relegating them, had been Norwich's 10th win from 11 matches. Now, if you look at this league table on the morning of the final game of the season, you would be forgiven for thinking, why try to build tension here? Norwich are already up. Well, I've been a sneaky fuck and admitted the 8th place Leicester, who had 2 games in hand on the Canaries and 6 points to make up. Now in a world of 3 points for a win, they could actually catch Norwich, especially when Ken Brown's side chucked in a defeat at Hillsborough. Thankfully though, Leicester dropped points themselves, them yo-yo Canaries, they just wouldn't go away. Norwich City were top flight again, but they were skirting a fucking fine line. Look at these records of Norwich and Wednesday from the 81-82 season. The first campaign for 3 points for a win. Norwich's 71 points would have been 49 the prior season, and Wednesday's 70 would have been 50 the prior season. Norwich had once again survived on the restructuring of English football. Into the new season, Ken Brown and his side went completely penniless and having to reduce the wage bill dramatically before they could even think about re-entering the black, never mind improving the playing staff. To say the club didn't have a pot to piss in, it wasn't going completely disastrously.
Cross on the far post, and what a start for David Cross.
And here's Mayer. And Mayer is there. It's a goal. Supporting him, having a go at Downs first. And a good drive.
Only a little bit disastrously, and in all fairness, this is skewed by the lack of available footage of Norwich victories. From the bruising 5-1 at home to Birmingham, to the October triumph over the reigning European champions Villa, to the victories over Ipswich and Luton on successive days after Christmas. To say they'd had 4/5 of feck all pumped into the starting 11, Norwich's position at the turn of the year above the dotted line was nothing short of miraculous, although it should be stated that Mick Channon did come in, originally only for a month as he made his debut at Portman Road after Christmas. That month would eventually bloat into 2.5 years. The whole season, however, spun on a dime when Coventry City were dispatched in the FA Cup 4th round replay at Carrow Road, whilst that and the heroics at home to Ipswich wouldn't generate even a whiff of Wembley thanks to Brighton in the quarter-finals. It did give the club a bit of a lift. Gone were the endless slew of winter defeats, and here was Norwich holding their own in the spring.
Got a foot to that. It's Shannon here. Good cross. Iain.
Gets past Kennedy. Goal. O'Neill.
It's well struck. It's superbly struck.
Suddenly the Canaries were chirping, which is what Canaries tend to do in April anyway. Luton were beaten at Kenilworth Road, Birmingham were utterly eviscerated at St Andrews, and Sunderland dispatched at Carrow Road before both Arsenal and Liverpool fell to the might of the yellow and green in the space of 3 days. The club had pulled away to the safety of mid-table, and suddenly everything was good news again. There was new investment into the club via the medium of Robert Chase. There was even a trophy by the means of the FA Youth Cup against Everton. The club was even turning a profit. The double over Liverpool, eventual league winners, meant that Norwich were the first ever team to have taken 6 points off the Anfield club in a single season. Everything was going swimmingly. Then the summer hit. Both Martin O'Neill and Steve Walford departed, and Willie Young succeeded the latter. He'd barely see out the summer, with his spell in Norfolk ravaged by injuries, spats with the management, and the fact that it was piss poor out there on the pitch. John Devine was a quieter but shrewder arrival. Robert Rosario would prove to be one for the future, as Ken Brown made the decision to ship out another so-called one for the future in Justin's brother, John Fashanu. Whilst the mood would take a little while to pick up after a typically tumultuous summer, nothing short of a miraculous display at home to Manchester United kicked the club back into gear.
64th minute, John Devine's cross for Dave Bennett. And it's a couple of defenders first, then Birchin does the rest.
Donowa on the far post, and Mick Channon doesn't miss them from there.
Finds Shannon. And Minden scores.
It goes towards Shannon. Dean's there with him too, and it comes to Dean. And Dean finally.
Minden for Devine. What a great save! Oh, it's in the back there for a tremendous first goal.
Back when there was still a point to being a mid-table top-tier side, glory days in the FA Cup were ultimately still out of the Canaries' reach thanks to a fifth-round loss at the baseball ground despite eliminating both Villa and Spurs from the competition. Villa, the side that ejected the Canaries out of the League Cup at the quarter-final stage, this despite the Canaries flapping beyond rivals Ipswich at Portman Road earlier on in the season. Outside of the aforementioned dramatic comeback at home to Manchester United in October, there was the energetic win at Watford, a near-perfect November with top teams in Southampton, West Brom, Everton and Spurs all vanquished before the pick of the bunch, 6 more rocked beyond Graham Taylor's Watford at Carrow Road. If anything, it was supposed to be a mid-season break of relaxation in Malta that clipped the Canaries' wings as they stuttered more in the second half of the season. They had been 7th when they jetted out to the Med, but hadn't settled their top-tier status until 3 games before the end of the campaign afterwards. Regardless, they'd had fun, they'd teased a cup run or 2, and were ultimately very comfortable in the top flight as they entered the 1984-85 campaign.
Jan Malbu gets clear, and Steve Bruce concedes an own goal on his debut. A superb chip, 2-0 Liverpool. His cross has Grobbelaar flapping, Birchin gets the touch, Mendon tidies up. Dean's high and wide, but Grobbelaar can't quite believe it. Breathless stuff this, as Birchin scrambles the equaliser. A tense moment, Neil makes it 3-2 Liverpool. Can they hold on now? Shannon makes it 3-3. A terrific game, and one to remember for Norwich defender Steve Bruce, despite the mishap of that own goal.
Yes, that was brand new signing Steve Bruce putting through his own net on the opening day. Things would get better for the young defender signed from Gillingham as the club got a healthy enough point from the opener and went from there. Whilst Dave Bennett was forced into quitting the team due to knee problems, Ken Brown flooded the first team with useful prospects nonetheless, from Jeremy Goss and Dale Gordon to Mark Farrington. Meanwhile, Chris Woods went down to injury, ending a run of 171 consecutive games without absence. In his place stepped new cover signing Joe Corrigan, whilst Asa Hartford also added vital experience. They were always going to be hit and miss whilst they got going in the first few months of the campaign.
The ball ran loose and ex-Villa player John Dean scooted in, giving Day no chance.
The veterans finish was deadly.
Dibble can't control the cross, and 34-year-old Asa Hartford is on the scene.
He's crossed perfectly for Louis Donowa to score.
The match is open to doubt. But certainly Wallace, if he plays for Sunderland, can't expect room like that.
But overall, Norwich couldn't have asked for much more from the opening half of the campaign. Well, maybe they'd have changed the electrical fault which burned down half their stadium in October. Nonetheless, they'd beaten enormous teams like Arsenal and Everton. They were 10th, and not even a New Year's Day defeat against Ipswich could dampen much of their mood going into 85. And the last match that I showed you in that montage up there, a loss in March against Sunderland, well, that was being called a dress rehearsal, and that means only one thing: the Canaries were off to Wembley once again.
The wonder that the players could see the ball, let alone the goal.
Despite the fog, the match attracted a crowd of close on 10,000, almost 5 times the Aldershot average this season. 8 minutes later, Norwich increased their lead, John Dean turning in his 8th goal of the season.
Get the ball away. Watson, his former England colleague, pressed into service by County. That was just before half-time.
Thanks to the great work of the Grimsby Town ground staff and helper, as a small army there who worked so hard all day, and that really made all the difference, we can bring you the Milk Cup quarter-final between Grimsby and Norwich City, and a good cup tie it turns out to be.
3 waiting for the cross.
And Iain, and the goalkeeper couldn't keep it out. Norwich City are in front, and a fair reflection on the play.
Van Wyk up to Dean. Will he turn? Dean. Deflected in! Bruce! Steve Bruce has got it!
Got a goal, yeah, deflected. Got one every round so far. I'd love to get one at the Twin Towers now, you know. It's going to be a great day out for everybody from Norfolk.
Unbelievable, great. I think it was just a corner from Morty. I was getting free a bit. We worked on getting control of the road and leave me spare, and it just went from there, you know, brilliant.
Good play by John Dean, it's still in. Shannon, the tackle. Oh, and it's an own goal. Came
Chisholm. Asa Harper claiming it.
The League Cup was starting to become Norwich City's competition, right from winning it in its second ever running in 1962 to the two lost Wembley finals of the 70s. Finally the Canaries had sung at the National Stadium, and it only took until 1985 to do so. But from the replayed tie at Aldershot, the snow-ridden Grimsby quarter-final and the high-octane, incredibly tense two-legged semi with Ipswich, not to mention the act of going to win at Wembley, it had all taken the stuffing out of Norwich. When the Alan Hardacre Trophy returned to Carrow Road, the Canaries found themselves a comfortable 13th, 9 points off the drop, not about to threaten a European spot. Not that Norwich had to worry about that one, winning the League Cup had already sewn that up. Upon their return home, Norwich took all 3 points off Coventry, then the fun really started. Norwich had officially signed off for the season with a win at Stamford Bridge on May 14th, but they may as well have signed off after Wembley. From April onwards, they had lost 9 of 14 games. Their season concluded on the 14th, and whilst 18th place was unideal and there were both West Ham and Coventry City with multiple games in hand on them, the Sky Blues needed to win all 3 of their remaining fixtures to relegate Norwich. They got their first 3 points of their 9 needed at Stoke on the 17th, but it just wasn't going to happen now, was it?
The unlikeliest source. They all missed it, but not Brian Kilcline, leaving Cyril Regis to score his second and perhaps last goal for Coventry.
Norwich were down. Coventry hadn't won 3 in a row in the top flight of English football in nearly 2 years before this one. And just when Norwich were at their most vulnerable, a sharp kick to the ribs came next. English clubs will be banned from European football for the next 5 years because of the Heysel disaster.
Watson goes up to the far post. Oh, and there's an own goal from the unfortunate Connor. And there's the whistle for the end of the game. Norwich City's 23rd league win takes them one step nearer a quick return to the First Division.
Knowing what we know about Norwich City and their ability to yo-yo back up to the top flight when they have been knocked down a peg or two, did you ever expect anything other than an immediate return? This time they did it in style, and they did it with weeks to spare. Right from the off, it was obvious that Norwich were going places when they acquired a sextuple of talent like Kevin Drinkle, Ian Culverhouse, Mike Phelan, Wayne Biggins, David Williams and Gary Brooke. The first few weeks were a little tentative, what with defeats on the road at Blackburn, Millwall and Portsmouth before Wimbledon's crazy gang upset them in October. It had hardly helped matters that directors were resigning en masse because of a dispute surrounding a building firm that were hired for the new main stand. In the end, Arthur Souths was spat out of the spin cycle and Robert Chase was hired as chairman in his place. On the pitch though, before the Canaries could start moping about the gaff and letting outside matters affect them, they turned on the style either side of Christmas. When Wimbledon came back to tear another strip off them on March the 8th, 18 games had passed and Norwich hadn't lost a single one and now commanded a 12-point lead over the Dons in 4th place, aka promotion was all but confirmed before the spring. That summer, it was easy to see why the Norwich City yo-yo might be in effect in reverse when you had Chris Woods and Dave Watson jumping ship for teams as lofty as Rangers and Everton respectively. Naturally, a slew of replacements flooded in, from Trevor Putney, Ian Crook and Ian Butterworth to the Sunderland double act of David Hodgson and Sean Elliott. Whilst Putney would be reliable in a Canary shirt, Hodgson wouldn't make it beyond November, by which point the final piece of the puzzle was slotted into place, Chris Wood's belated replacement, a certain Brian Gunn. With a fresh new main stand erected, a new division to play in, let's crack on and show you some footage of, statistically, Norwich City's greatest season in professional football so far.
Mike Phelan was just one of a string of impressive performances early in the season.
It is slipped away, and 12 minutes later, Newcastle were beaten. Dale Gordon receives from Williams, Thomas blocks, but the rebound falls to Drinkle and
The explosive start to the season had Norwich second to Nottingham Forest after 9 matches, only via the medium of goal difference. Naturally, this couldn't last too long, as proven when a couple of stuttering October draws graduated into Merseyside thrashings by the end of the year, and only 2 games before Christmas were won. No matter how impressive they had been disposing of Spurs and Oxford at Carrow Road, the Canaries had settled into a more natural order of things in 9th by Christmas, allowing the big boys of Arsenal, Forest, Liverpool and Everton to occupy the top 4. And whilst they were quickly unseated from both cup competitions, it was a testament to the club as to how they'd bounced back from a 4-0 Goodison whitewash in early December to a similarly pitiful display at White Hart Lane in April. Not a single league game was lost. Alright, only 5 matches were won in that time frame, but they had beaten Forest, won at Old Trafford, also been hard to beat, especially in the face of Arsenal, Watford, Chelsea, Villa and others, was a skill in of itself. The draw specialists were back, and entering April, Norwich occupied the top 7. Nobody came close to their tally of losing just 5 matches, and whilst that would nearly double in the 9 games before the end of the season, the Canaries were perched impressively in 5th place, a club record in the top flight. Only Everton could match their impressive loss record, and they had just romped to the title, so just imagine if some of those draws had been turned into victories. Maybe little old Norwich could have snuck in a title race instead of lingering 18 points back on the Toffees. Everything should have been rosy, shouldn't it? But haven't you heard? This is Norwich City Football Club.
Has done well. Can he get the cross in? He does. It's a good one. A great goal from Rocastle.
7 games. This fine away win at Norwich helped lift the gloom. Barry Horn, the scorer.
Just in case you missed the first of our Norwich City videos, click on it here. It's the start of a 4-part series that we're doing this week.